The doctor was rather puzzled. You should be recovering by this time, he said. Have you been following my instructions? Well, doctor, said the patient, I've done most of what you told me to do, but I can't manage the 2-mile exercise walk you recommended for every morning because it makes me dizzy. What do you mean, dizzy? Asked the doctor. Well, I forgot to tell you, I'm a lighthouse keeper in the middle of the harbor. Soak it in for just a second. The image of a lighthouse has often been used to describe churches, as churches have light from God to share with the world. Jesus said to his disciples, you are the light of the world. He gave that mission to us after he said, I am the light of the world himself. So our church, our congregation is like a lighthouse when we gather here in Woodmont to worship, to enjoy fellowship, to work on projects, and as we implement all kinds of other programs within the congregation that nourish and keep the light of faith shining brightly in our own hearts, in our minds, and in our actions. To some degree, we are lighthouse keepers, but unlike the patient who complained to his doctor of dizziness when he attempted a 2-mile walk in his lighthouse, the members of a vital, faithful congregation not only labor to keep the lighted inside the lighthouse, but they also climb down and they row lifeboats to rescue those who are in need. Members of a vital, faithful congregation do much more than walk in circles inside their lighthouse. Rather, they reach out to people outside with words and resources and concrete actions that convey God's love to others, and God's concern for justice among the world's people as well. Vital, faithful congregations think of ways to go out from their lighthouses to reach out and grab hold of the hands of others, many of whom may be strangers to them, but whose lives are in danger of sinking in an ocean of problems, whether it be hunger or a threat of homelessness, illness, broken relationships, troubled families, and a host of other things that beset people's lives and exhaust their bodies and their spirits each day. We know what Jesus did in Matthew 14, verse 28, when one of his own followers, Peter, faltered in faith, began to sink in the water. The biblical text clearly says Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him. That's a great image to keep in mind when we're planning ways to go out from our lighthouse to love people with the love and compassion that God has for people. Providing food and volunteers for local food pantries, participating in an area hunger walk, or supporting area shelters or soup kitchens with contributions, or even serving meals there ourselves, are all driven by our following the example and commandment of Jesus, who said, love one another. John 13:34. Love one another. In the parable of the Good Samaritan in Luke 10, Jesus teaches us our neighbor is whoever needs us. There are no lines drawn in the sand between people and the eyes of God. All are equally precious in the sight of God. The church, like a lighthouse in Christ's name, reaches out to everybody according to their needs, as a representative of God's Spirit in the world doing things. The title theme of a conference I attended in Pembroke, New Hampshire a long time ago when I was a student at Middlebury College in Middlebury, Vermont. The title was always stuck with me after that. It was simply that the walls that we build between us do not rise to heaven. In quick review of the previous 3 Sundays, this is part 4 in a series of 4 sermons on the general theme, the 4 marks of a faithful church. 4 characteristics of a faithful church. We are going to be engaging in focus groups of discernment planning at 3 sessions this coming week, and we will be generating lots of ideas around these 4 marks of being a faithful church. In quick review of these 3 Sundays we've already passed, the first mark was proclamation, ways in which we proclaim our faith. We teach it, we tell it, and we learn it ourselves within the church body. Second, you will find within a congregation, a faithful congregation, a sense of Christian community, like no other community you'll find, because it's nurtured and supported by the characteristics and spirit of Jesus. We learn to treat each other that way. It's a warm, compassionate, forgiving, welcoming, caring relationship with one another, and the extension of that same spirit to newcomers as well. And third, you'll find in a congregation, a faithful church, placing worship at the center of things. Talked about that last week, dynamic worship. Eager to worship God in ways that engage our hearts, our minds, our souls, and our strength in praising and thanking God. Now, those first 3 marks say a lot about what's going on inside the lighthouse. Today, I lift up the emphasis of the 4th mark, which is Christian outreach. So we go outside the lighthouse and let down the lifeboats and row to where people need to have some help and some hope. As I said earlier, Christian outreach means that members of a vital congregation do much more than walk in circles inside the lighthouse, though that is important to keep the lamp lighted. We also need to provide and grow those lifeboats wherever there are neighbors in need, both locally and around the world. In this sense, a vital, faithful congregation is something like a base camp, generously providing help and resources and encouragement and hope to wherever people are hurting in the local community and in the wider world. We minister to them. We're all ministers. It says that right at the top of the worship service. The ministers, all members. Not just a pastor. That's just one kind of minister. We're all ministers. We minister to people. We bring or send our hope and support to where they are, just like God does for us. God comes into this world in Jesus. He comes up close and personal so that we might know and see clearly what God's will for us really is. Let me tell you an absolutely true and personal story. For 3 years I lived in New York City as a student there at Union Theological Seminary, and we worked in churches each year during the year and on the weekends. My senior year, after Pat and I were married, we were in a married couples dorm there. I worked in a storefront church, which was an outreach mission of Trinity Parish, an Episcopal parish in Manhattan. And I worked in St. Christopher's Chapel on Henry Street for the long weekends. One evening I visited a family who lived in a cold water flat with a heating system that was not functioning at all. The stench in the elevators and the very narrow hallways was almost more than I was willing to breathe in. There were 8,000 people in this one block of city urban life. I knew from the previous Sunday the family was really looking forward to the visit. There were 9 children in a small 2-room apartment. The area was being heated by a glowing kerosene heater on the floor in one room and an open oven door in the other. There was no heat in the radiators. It was very, very sad. During my visit, someone mentioned Mrs. Leroy, who lived down the hallway. She hadn't been seen for more than 2 days, and that was unusual for her because Mrs. Leroy, along with her walker, made the rounds, she called it, her rounds, down the hallway on her floor, knocking on everyone's door to make sure everyone was okay. Mrs. Leroy had not been seen for more than 2 days. I suggested we pay her a visit to see if she were okay. She was not okay. She had fallen and could not be heard for her cries of help. While the paramedics were called, we gave her a cup of cold water. I relive this every time I tell it. Later at the hospital, I was impressed with the doctor in the ER said that a simple drink of water was more important than any of us realized at the time. She was severely dehydrated. Back at school, for one of my classes, I wrote a paper about the blessing of just giving someone in need a cup of cold water. Something simple and small, but hugely life-giving. The Christian outreach of a local congregation can sometimes be as simple and down-to-earth as giving a cup of cold water, and translate that into all other kinds of small things we can do for people.